So the first one, um, try not to use objects in your children's sermon, because for children, an object is an object. So unless your sermon is about that object,
Hmm.
it can be hard for them to conceptualize the object
Yeah,
as.
they don't have an abstract understanding at this developmental point. And so if you want to talk about, well, David used a stone, holding a stone is appropriate,
Right.
you know, but saying the stone is the way God, is also how he sends his angels to protect over us. And that's what this represents. Like you lost them.
Don't begin your children's sermon with a question. Puts children on the spot. It can confuse them because there's no context necessarily involved with the question. If you ask, why am I holding this glass of water? They might give you the obvious reason. Well, you're thirsty,
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
No, I definitely agree with that. You want to ask them questions where you don't care what the response is. Like you care, but you want them to interject their worldview because it's funny and it's cute and it helps them connect. But asking them deep questions, it's a trap.
especially right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's the
Yep.
first thing you say, why am I holding this glass of water?
Yeah. That's not a good idea.
Focus on feelings instead of concepts. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, children definitely, they're understanding feelings. They, in a lot of ways, some feelings are a new thing for them, but that's very much where their worldview is at, how things make them feel.
Yeah. And they probably can't even explain that. They have feelings, but they're not going to be like, I'm feeling depressed right now, or I'm feeling like they're not going to get that.
Right.
They'll know it makes them feel something,
Mhm.
even if they can't explain what that feeling is.
So focusing more on, it's reminding us to focus again on where their world is at. Where's the
Yeah.
wonder? Where's the awe, the delight, the anticipation,
Hmm.
thankfulness, sadness, confusion, fear, excitement, the
Yep.
feeling of being loved. Um,
And they're going to pick up on the person who's giving the lessons expression. So if you're talking to the kids about being excited, then acting excited, they'll start to mimic that. If you're talking about being sad and you get kind of quiet and you're like, yeah, they'll start to feel that and they will mirror that back to you. So just being like, and so I felt sad. They're like, wait, that doesn't connect. But acting sad while you're saying I'm sad, that makes sense to them.
just tell the story.
Hmm.
And you talked about that in the beginning too, how you're telling the story. You're telling the
Hmm.
same stories over and
Yeah.
over. It's why children like to see that same movie 1,000 times over or whatever, because they like what's familiar.
Yeah. My kids loved watching Dora the
Oh,
Explorer when they were little, and that was torturous because as adults, it was the same plot line every single time. But
yes.
what happened was the kids then knew how to answer, what are we going to do? We're going to, ask the map. And like they knew the answer to the question. So don't ask a question that they don't know the answer to or that you haven't taught them the answer to already. But so it's a simple narrative. It's easy to follow, and there's points where they can interject with the narrative along the way. And that makes it meaningful to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, as adults, we want to try to make it more so it's more
Mhm.
interesting to us.
Right.
We don't want it to be simple. We've
Right.
done that already. We want a little more difficult. The children's sermon is for the children. It's again a simple idea, but when we have other adults in the room, we may feel like we want to entertain them as well.
Yeah.
We can often um, say things or do things or incorporate things that might go over a child's head.
Well,
Um,
yeah, definitely we'll go over the kids' heads. Yeah, and you got to get comfortable with being silly and stupid, and it's okay. Like, you're
yeah,
not doing it for the adults, you're not doing it for anybody else, but for these kids to really get an experience and to pick something up new. And so you get silly, and
yeah.
yeah, that's okay.
It's okay to be silly.
Yeah.
We sit with the children.
Yeah.
It can be intimidating to some, perhaps, to be standing all 6 feet tall or whatever. and towering over them and talking to them. Um, and it's not necessarily that your language is that you're talking down to them, but perhaps your body language might be down to you.
Yeah, my wife and I used to talk about this, and she would remind me sometimes when we were disciplining the kids, like, okay, so you don't feel like you're trying to intimidate the kids, but imagine if someone who's your size bigger than you came up to you and interacted with you that way. It would be very threatening. Now, obviously, we're not threatening them in a children's sermon,
Right.
but yeah, that would be crazy to have people that towered over us up in our space talking down to us and telling us, we want to get down and help them feel safe and comfortable.
Next one is use a conversational tone of voice, but don't talk down to them. The example that this person gave was think of Mr. Rogers
Oh, yeah.
and how he.
Mr. Rogers was amazing because what he did was exactly right. He talked to the kids like they're human beings,
Mhm.
you know, like they're little human beings. So we simplify things a little bit, but you just like a conversation with them. They kids appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Next one, don't use sarcasm in your sermon.
Yeah, they don't get that. That and it just makes you look like a jerk, really, because you don't need to flex your mental superiority or your intellectual superiority over little kids. It's like you don't need to do
Mm,
that. Just talk to them. Like people, if you're doing a children's sermon and adults are in the room and the kid says something crazy, the adults are going to know it's something crazy. You don't have to point it out. Like take their answers and roll with it. Like
yeah,
that's what you do.
ending your sermon with a prayer. Um,
Yeah, that's like that one, and I love that it says something short. Only 3 or 4. You're not praying. Yeah, it's again, it's not for the audience.
right.
It's we're trying to teach kids the story, but we're also teaching kids how to pray and expecting them to listen for more than a sentence or two with their eyes closed. Come on,
Yeah.
adults have a hard enough time doing that. Things that I think of when you're teaching kids, like it said, keep it simple and everything like that. I also try to find opportunities while you're doing stories to get them connected to the story itself, even though it's not scripturally like what's in the Bible. It gives them a chance to be interact because otherwise they're not gonna tune in for very long. So
Mhm.
find little opportunities where they interact, whether it's the story has animals in it, and so you say, okay, we're all going to be sheep now, and you make a ba sound. Everybody do it, and make the adults do it too. Like it's not for them, but you know what? They can feel silly too if you're going to do it and feel silly. But
Yeah.
little things like that where you bring them into it and then you pause it. Like you have to have the ability to help them interact with the story and pull out of the story so that you can keep going because you could lose it really fast. So there's ways to do that. If there's ways to get them physically involved, whether it's like, okay, flap your wings like one of the birds, everybody's flapping their wings and they stop, but doing things like that where they're getting involved physically or verbally and or repeating an answer, like you teach them, hey, whenever we do this, we're all going to say this. And that's that choral speech that kids are used to from the silly TV shows they watch or from preschool or kindergarten. That's how they learn.